right, y'all, welcome to the Scott Horton Show. I am the director of the Libertarian Institute, editorial director of antiwar.com, author of the book Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, and I've recorded more than 5,000 interviews going back to 2003, all of which are available at scotthorton.org. You can also sign up for the podcast feed. The full archive is also available at youtube.com/Scott Horton Show. All right, you guys, on the line, I've got my good friend Mike Swanson. He's from wallstreetwindow.com, and you guys have probably already read his book, The War State, which I advertise on this show, which is a great history of the rise of the military-industrial complex in America after World War II. And I know you all loved it. And he's got a new one out. Hang on, I better get it so I can read the subtitle correctly and everything. Why the Vietnam War? Nuclear bombs and nation building in Southeast Asia, 1945 through 1961. And I happen to know, because this is my friend, that he's been working on this thing so hard for years and based on really great primary source documents. And this is not just some synthesis like my book retelling everybody else's journalism. This is some real primary historical type of research sort of thing, adding to the real history of the origins of the war in Vietnam that I just know is going to be of the greatest of interest, not just to you guys, but to, academic historians and everyone really interested in parsing the reasons for the origin of that war. So I guess that leads me to, well, first of all, welcome you to the show. How's it going, Mike?
Oh, I'm doing great. Yeah, thanks for mentioning the book. Unfortunately, it's just the first part, so there'll be at least one more volume now. I got to start working on. But I just started reading your book enough already yesterday. I'm only on page 12, but you talk about how a lot of people promoted or advocated for the wars of Iraq and Afghanistan by saying we have to fight the people over there. And that's idea is basically what I'm trying to argue against in my Vietnam War book, that it really has nothing to do with these wars. I'm so glad that you point that out and demolish that myth in your book.
Cool. Man, I can't wait to read this thing, and I'm sorry, but I know you understand why I haven't had a chance to crack into it yet.
I know how it is. I've got a mountain of stuff myself, and there's so much going on.
Somehow, I wish we could do like osmosis, where just hold it up against the side of my head and somehow just soak it in. Do like the lawnmower man and just implant it straight into my brain. No, I can't wait to read this, man. I can't wait to read this. It's real exciting. I guess, let me ask you this. Has Gareth read it, and what did he say?
Well, I don't know if he has. I sent him an older version of it several months ago. But I'll say this, that I read his book, Perils Dominance, probably 10 years ago, right when it came out. Mm-hmm. And he says something, I think in the introduction in the first chapter, that he believes the year 1954 was a critical moment that led to the United States being involved in Vietnam, because he says that we realized, or the people in the Pentagon realized, that we had a preponderance of strategic power, nuclear power, against the Soviet Union. And we started to adjust our thinking based on that, or people in the national security state did. And I forgot he said that, and I went back, looking at it. I was like, oh, and that's actually the whole thesis of this book. So is that one, idea, and I'm just proving it. He just mentions it in passing, but he's the only other person I've seen do it. So in a way, I'm simply proving one of the claims in his book.
That's interesting. All right. Well, you know what I need to do is sit down and read them both, and then I'll have you guys on to fight about it. But
okay, that'd be fun.
That might take 3 or 4 years to get to, but anyway. You should see the pile of books that I ain't quite got to yet over here. It's shameful and dangerous, right? It could fall and hurt someone. Listen, I want to know what the hell is going on with the economy, and I want to just start out complaining about what's going on here. I don't know if you saw this thing. I forgot the origin. I try not to get into these woke debates or whatever. I just thought it was funny that the New York Times reporter that got fired was tattletaled on by a white girl for saying the N-word, and then the lady from the 1619 Project said, well, she's politically black, and so she can do it, and doesn't make her a tattletale or whatever. Anyway. So I was wondering then, maybe I'm politically black now that I am being gentrified right out of Austin, Texas by, I don't know, 100,000 screaming, fleeing Californians trying to get away from Gavin Newsom's tyranny. And it ain't just the blacks. And I'm telling you, the blacks of East Austin, they will be an endangered species, if not extinct, or completely moved to Elgin or the far side of Bastrop or something within 5 or 10 years from now. And all the rest of the Austinites with them. And we're going to have an entire capital city that's all bought up by a bunch of Californians offering cash for houses they ain't even seen yet. And they've driven up the cost of a house in Austin by $100,000 across the board everywhere in 1 year because of this germ. At the same time, you got massive economic devastation, and even though the lockdowns in Texas have been much less worse than in a lot of places, you got all kinds of people who are broke as hell, and mortgages and rents and things coming due and all of these things. And so I want to know what's going on in my town. I also want to know if there's, for my own sake, is there going to be a crash in these insane prices anytime soon? Or just because of the artificial demand, because of the California lockdown, you can just, if you're an Austinite, you can just kiss your ass goodbye and go ahead and move to Houston or something. It's over. Or what?
Well, that's two questions. So I'll answer the first one first, then talk about is it going to crash or come down at least. But what you're saying is really the big dichotomy in the economy that we all experience. And it's been something that has been happening for years, but now is magnified out of control. And that is financial assets and real estate prices doing well, going up, causing rents to go up, the cost of living to go up, while, up until, let's say, this past March of last year, wages since the 1970s have been fairly stagnant. Even though unemployment went down during most of Trump's administration, wages didn't really go up. People, except most people didn't really feel like they're living through an economic boom, I would argue. But it doesn't matter, when March came, the shutdowns happened and there were mass layoffs. And today, at the beginning of this month, the Labor Department released figures saying that the unemployment rate is like 6.7%. However, the real unemployment rate is over 11%. It's like 11.5, 0.7, somewhere in there. And that unemployment rate is when you count what the Labor Department takes out, which is their so-called discouraged workers. These are people who have been out of job for long enough that they're no longer, really even looking for a job, or they feel like they can't find one. And if you're not looking, then you're called discouraged, and they don't count you anymore. But if you count those people, we're close to 12%. And the thing about that figure is, historically in the United States, when unemployment's been above 11%, there have been social tensions, labor strikes, or riots, and so forth. And I'm speaking of the Great Depression, and also in the 1800s, we didn't have 20% unemployment like we had in the 1930s, but whenever we got above 11, there was big, events that were taking place. There was a march of unemployed people towards the end of the 19th century. There's a great railroad strike that took place, and just these things happen. And so I would argue we're living in moments like that, and the Black Lives Matter and the people that riot on the Capitol, I would chalk up as symptoms of this underlying issue. And there's crime spiking in different areas of the country in different ways, or different types of crime, and all that's going on. While, as you mentioned, housing prices are going up nationally. Housing prices went up 10% last year. A lot of it, some of it, is being driven by people leaving big cities to go to smaller cities or ones they think um, are safer, or they're easier. They're not going to get the virus or whatever the reason. But on the East Coast, it's happening where people are fleeing New York, and anyone get on as a curiosity at nighttime, go load up YouTube and just type live New York City, and you'll see someone walking around doing a live stream. It's not always the same person. It's just people, so many people there to do it, I guess. And you'll just see how empty the city is. And even the town I live in, I was speaking with a real estate agent a week ago, and they told me that there's 70 houses for sale, and normally there would be 400, and the housing prices are even going up a little bit here. So this is a national thing happening, but I would also say that it's being driven with interest rates going to record lows. This has been a trend for a long time, rates being super low, and the idea that they can be too low was something I honestly learned from Ron Paul when he was doing hearings at the congressional banking committees around 2000 in the late 90s, saying, "Oh, rates are too low. You're creating a bubble." Well, and we saw the results of that, right? In
That was when I learned it
2006.
too. I learned it
Yeah,
from him
yeah.
too.
And
In
now
fact, that was
I
part
was,
of my question for you that I meant to ask you
yeah,
was
yeah.
because I was so smart that I was listening to Ron Paul, I knew this stuff. I mean, I'd read The Creature from Jekyll Island and stuff, so I had kind of a basic Misesian sort of an idea here about the boom and bust cycle and all that already. But, Ron was, of course, great. But I was an idiot because I was telling my friends, I was so smart, I was listening to Ron, but I was so stupid, I was telling my friends, oh no, don't buy a house now. Don't you know that it's a giant housing bubble? You got to wait till the bubble pops, but before the interest rates go up and get in there on a locked thing and all this, you're making a bad decision. Well, they're like, whatever, Horton, you don't know what you're talking about. And then they bought their houses, and then the crash didn't come for 8 years. And around here, their value had gone way up. I don't know the total percent, but when the crash came in 08, 09, it only went down 10%, and then it went right back up again within 2 years. And so they'd have been a fool to listen to me because I was saying it's a giant bubble, so wait till it's not. But they were right to say it's a giant bubble. I better get in on it now rather than later. So where are we in that timeline? Can you tell me that?
Well, I think we're in a little different situation, in that the I think we're going to go through like a repeat of what happened in the 1970s. And the reason why is that last year, when the stock market crashed in March, the Federal Reserve lowered rates as far as they could go down, and then started these bond buying programs or amplified them. They've been doing them since 2008, but they said, we'll buy as many as necessary now. And the 10-year Treasury bond yield fell to under 0.55. In other words, less than a percent, less than half a percent, a little less than half a percent. So money, the interest went to nothing. It still is super low, and this created a situation where it did make housing. It's cheaper to borrow money. Companies were doing it to issue bonds, and people are doing it to finance houses and take out loans and all these sort of things, similar to what happened in the lead up to 2006. But here's where one factor that is different is that now the government debt is so large that the interest rates can't go up, but so much higher, or else the government wouldn't really be able to fund them, the deficit anymore, and would have to default on the debt, or I don't really know what the alternative would be if rates continue to just go up, and they're going up slowly right now. So right now, the interest rate on the 10-year Treasury bond is 1.3. It's more than doubled since where it was in August. I don't know what the magic number is where the whole government would default, but just say it's 3%. I know 4 or 5 years ago they were saying it was 5%. The Federal Reserve put out a report saying 5, but I don't know what the magic number is. But what this is going to mean is that at some point, interest rates will go up so much or at a high enough that the Federal Reserve would say we can't let them go up anymore, and then they would start to buy even more bonds to completely, they just monetize the bond market essentially. And Jerome Powell, the Federal Reserve Chairman, has said a couple times in last year that this is a future policy tool that they would use to keep rates super low, prevent them from going up. So I think this is the future. I'm not sure when this will start, at the end of this year or next year or whatever the case, but it would have the effect of creating the side effect, I believe, of creating inflation, causing the U.S. dollar to fall, because it would basically wreck the whole bond market as any sort of investment for a regular person or foreigners for that matter. And that would make real estate go up even more, or at least not go down. And this essentially is what happened in the 1970s. The U.S. dollar went off the gold standard. It fell about 50% against most world currencies. And during that decade, real estate went up and was a good investment for people. So the stock market's not so much, but real estate and gold, commodities, they were the best things to be invested in. So I believe that's really what we're headed for, instead of a repeat of the 2008 type of debacle. It's not good, but it's different.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess I got to move out to the country, man. I don't know what I'm going to do. I hope I got such good internet here in Round Rock, but I'm already, one town north of Austin. Now I'm going to be, I don't know what. I ain't moving to Waco, god dang it. Maybe I'll have to move to, what? I actually talked to, not that I have money to buy a house, but I was just talking to someone, about like what could someone get, what kind of house could one get for this much money or that one? And she's like, well, you could probably get a house for that in Killeen, that's 100 miles from here. That's the town, adjacent to Fort Hood. For $300,000, I could get you into a house in Killeen, she said. So the Californians are coming. My God. All right, well, so... And you know what? I talked to, it was the same lady told me. She's got this house that's been in her family for more than 100 years or something in Travis Heights, this great neighborhood just south of the river and, essentially south downtown Austin. And she said it's gone up in value so high, but it's killing her. She's going to go bankrupt because of the property taxes. There's no break on the property taxes whatsoever. They just take every opportunity to exploit and exploit it and exploit. So they're going to end up confiscating this lady's house and selling it to somebody else. Yeah, and she's a real estate agent or like some kind of broker or whatever who's like cashing in on this feast, and even she can't pay the property taxes for the artificially rising cost of the house. I know. Yeah, the whole thing's nuts, man. Okay, you guys, check it out. The new book is finally done. Enough already. Time to end the war on terrorism. It's available in paperback and Kindle. Also, the audiobook is coming, although that might take a little while. For all those who participated in the big fundraiser of 2019, I have the list, and you will be getting all your stuff as soon as my boxes of wholesale copies arrive. Thank you so much to everybody for your support of the show and of the Libertarian Institute, and I hope you like the book. Hey guys, Scott Horton here for ExpandDesigns.com. Harley Abbott and his crew do an outstanding job designing, building, and maintaining my sites, and they'll do great work for you. You need a new website? Go to ExpandDesigns.com/Scott and save $500. Hey guys, check out Listen and Think audiobooks. They're at listenandthink.com and, of course, on audible.com. And they feature my book, Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, as well as brand new Out Inside Syria by our friend Reese Erlich, and a lot of other great books, mostly by libertarians there. Reese might be one exception, but essentially they're all libertarian audiobooks. And here's how you can get a lifetime subscription to Listen and Think audiobooks. Just donate $100 to The Scott Horton Show at scotthorton.org/donate. All right, so you know what? Tell me what you think about all this GameStop stuff and Bitcoins and all that, too. I know that you're a cynic on Bitcoins, but I'm interested in what you think about what all is going on.
Well, yeah, tomorrow we're due on the 18th. The Senate, the Congress is going to hold hearings into GameStop. And obviously, you know, the stock went up crazy, went to 400 a couple weeks ago, and it took over the entire news cycle, which to me was the most interesting thing about it. So I'm sure most people, you know, have heard of it. Now that news cycle's kind of passed, so people probably forgot. But so I'll just quickly say that this stock, you know, GameStop is a chain of stores that's on economically hard times. They were selling primarily video games, and now people buy video games mostly on the internet. So they haven't been able to really adapt to the changes in the marketplace in a way that, you know, make them profitable. We have a store up about just a mile from my house, and it's basically empty all the time. So it's a dying retail chain, and like bookstores have been destroyed by Amazon, GameStop has suffered also. However, the stock went completely crazy. It went up from, I think it was like trading under $5 6 months ago to $400. And what happened was a lot of hedge funds and institutional investors were shorting the stock. That meant they were borrowing shares from their broker and selling them to profit when the stock would fall. So they're betting the company would go bankrupt or get in trouble financially even more. And there was a Reddit message board called Wall Street Bets with less than 500,000 members a year ago. And for whatever reason, these people decided we're going to buy GameStop shares because we like it. And these people are short. And if enough of them buy it, and we make it go up, these hedge funds will lose money, and then they'll have to buy to close their positions and drive the stock up more and so forth. And in fact, this is what happened. There are several giant hedge funds that lost a lot of money, and they ended up having to sell at really high prices. But by the time of that final week of this thing going up, when it hit the news and captured people's imagination, they ended up, you know, millions of people around the country opened up accounts on Robinhood. That Wall Street Bets to buy the stock. That Wall Street Bets message board gained millions of members in 5 days, and then the stock crashed. So all these people bought in, you know, at the top, and on Robinhood they show you the top 100 positions ranked by the number of people that own them, and GameStop went up to number 12 when it wasn't on the list at all, like a year ago. So millions and millions of people piled into this thing. Even where I live on Facebook, 2 people were bragging they're buying it, and now it's crashed. But what's interesting about it, or what I believe, is that the whole narrative, or part of the narrative, was that as little guys can take on Wall Street, we can bankrupt hedge funds, and as before the stock crash, this is what was being said. And, you know, this is great. It's showing how the internet can empower you, and it could change how everyone's dealing with the stock market, and it's like a revolution and all this. And in the end, you know, I think all that wasn't true at all, because if you go and look, which I did, I found that the people that bought into the GameStop thing in the fall were giant hedge funds themselves. So it was hedge funds on both sides of the trade. doing most of it, and the
Really.
little people were just on the margins. Yeah.
Hmm. Although, I mean, the little people really did help to screw the big. I mean, they knew that they were making a bubble and that GameStop wasn't really worth this much, but they were just trying to do it to get past the deadlines to transfer all that money away from the hedge funds who'd made the short bets, right?
Well, that was what the people were doing that bought in before the other week. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, for every one of those, there's probably 1,000 or something of people that bought in too late,
Mm. You
didn't know
know,
what they're doing.
yeah. Yeah, I guess, yeah, probably that's the problem, right? Is it's the little guy who ends up holding the bag, not the big guy.
Yeah, yeah.
But
But
the little guy
underlying
should know that, like, hey, man, I'm going to get in there. I'm going to make a couple 100%, and I'm going to get the hell out quick. Don't be the last guy holding the bag.
well,
That's the whole game, man. It's a game.
one of the other things that happened too during this part of this narrative was that Robinhood and several other online brokers all of a sudden announced you can only buy a couple shares in the stock. We're going to limit trading in the stock. And people were saying, oh, they're trying to help the short hedge funds by stopping us from making it go up even more. Well, that's not really what was going on. These brokers also kind of act as banks because when you have an account with them, they'll let you borrow money and go on margin, borrow money from them. They'll also lend your shares to other customers without you knowing it. That's how they let people short the stocks. They borrow the shares from you and let someone else sell them. That's how shorting is done. So they act as banks where they lend securities and lend money, and that also can put them in a situation where, in theory, if a lot of their customers are on margin and own the same stock and it crashes, the whole broker could default, just like banks. Some banks defaulted when real estate fell in 2008. So they were forced to limit trading in these stocks. Some of the Robinhood went out and was forced to go borrow money itself to cover potential losses that could be generated from all this kind of speculative activity. And we've got now record margin debt in the stock market. A record amount of money is being borrowed by people to buy more stocks. So underlying all this story is, I think it's similar to the real estate thing in that after March, after the stock market crashed in March, there was actually a flood of millions of people opening up brokerage accounts with brokers like Robinhood and so forth to trade for the very first time. A lot of them were using stimulus money from the government, and some of them were people that used to do sports betting, and then they couldn't bet on sports because sports shut down, so they just switched to let's bet on stocks. But all these millions of people, and it's about 5 million that opened up accounts with Robinhood alone, they became a new pool of traders that had never really traded before. So they were much of the people leading the activity in a stock like this. But again, I see that as a symptom of the interest rates being so low, helping the stock market go up and recover after it crashed as quickly as it did, which attracts more people into it, just as rising real estate prices attracts even more real estate speculators. And that's what I wonder about these California people. Are these people buying second homes, to move to Houston, and New Yorkers buying second homes to go south and so forth, and think they're going to go back, or I don't know what they're doing. They think they're investing by doing this, partly, I assume. So it is all, I believe, driven by these Federal Reserve policies and distortions in prices in the market at various markets. With real estate, my understanding, or what you read if you read economics textbooks, is real estate, the right value for real estate is basically, if you invest 100,000 in real estate, you should be able to make $7,000 if you rent out the property a year. You ought to be able to cover the mortgage and just make a little bit extra. That's a 7%, uh, basically. So there's a valuation metric that makes sense, and we went way beyond that. I know in 2006. I don't know where we are nationally on that, but definitely the stock market valuations are higher by a lot of metrics than they were even in 2000. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Oh man. And the Bitcoin thing. I gotta tell you, if I hadn't have paid for my wife's surgery last fall by selling my Bitcoins, I'd be able to buy a really nice house in Austin right now. I'd have something like $600,000 or whatever back of my envelope, scratching, just pretending if I'd held them instead of sold them. So you got a lot of guys who say, um, well, the one thing we can all agree on is what a mess the U.S. dollar's in. As you said, they can't raise interest rates at all. All they can do is keep printing money. But, geez, they can only print so much money before things get even worse, and they've backed themselves into such a corner. And, hey, I'm a libertarian. I got ideological reasons for saying not just, wow, I could have got rich quick and bought a house, but also, wouldn't it be great if everybody just opted out of government money and we just shut the federal government down? Who needs them anyway? Not me, Mike. And so, maybe that's all Americans and all corporations should follow the lead of Elon Musk here and diversify heavily into Bitcoins. What do you think?
Well, personally, myself, well, anybody, you have to choose what you want to invest in, and you can't invest in everything, right? Say I want to buy stocks. Well, unless I'm buying a fund that owns every stock in the market, I can't own them all. So if I own 20 stocks and I see five I don't own go up, I don't really care, as long as the ones I do have are okay. So I say that because it's best not to just invest in one thing, but spread out also. And also not feel like if you're not in something and it goes up to beat yourself over the head or even care. And that's how I am with the cryptocurrency stuff. I don't own any, so I don't really care if it goes up or down. I own gold and silver, um, for the reasons people that own Bitcoin say they own it. As you just articulated, the dollar, it has gone down since really historically, but it's been sliding even more, and I think it's going to continue to do that, based on what I was saying about the bond market and interest rates and so forth. But I personally own gold and silver and mining stocks to bet on that, and for me, uh, Bitcoin would just be another extension of the same bet, but it's more volatile than gold and silver. So I would feel very uncomfortable putting a lot of money into it because it can crash, or when it has corrections or goes into bear market, it falls a lot. And I wouldn't want to have a lot of money tied up in something so volatile. Silver, for example, is more volatile than gold, so I own more gold than silver. But there's also, a belief factor in Bitcoin too, and you know, I'm not sure it's going to replace global currencies. Um, and I see signs that other countries may outlaw Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies in order to create their own controlled currency. India has said something about doing this, and there's some sort of digital yuan that's supposed to be in the works. So I see these as threats, potential threats to Bitcoin, and but maybe they got some workaround on that I don't know about. But I also prefer buying stocks more than cryptocurrencies because I can get a dividend and there's earnings and some way I can value it. I don't really know how to value these cryptocurrencies on a fundamental basis. I don't know what a Bitcoin is really worth, or the other things. Like I don't know what the argument is that it's expensive or cheap.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have the benefit of being an outsider on all this because I don't have any money. So I have enough to keep the lights on, but that's always about it, which is fine. You know, it's part of being a nonprofit organization for a living. But you know, it means I don't have a dog in these fights at all. I hope nobody gets upset, you know, listening to any of this, because there are some people who are really devoted to this, and for ideological and other reasons, and I can certainly see why. But I wish I'd invented it. and you know, I mean, I guess I don't know enough about how it works or whatever, but I'm going to get a million emails explaining it all now. But the way they preach it, that, man, this is the internet of money. You never need a banker again. You just convert the whole world to this, and we all just pay each other, and it's nobody else's business, and it works great. And why should anybody else get a cut, you know, when it comes to some credit card or some Wall Street firm or some IRS agent or anybody else?
One thing about it is I'm skeptical of people when they talk that trading any market, just setting Bitcoin aside, that trading a market is an act that's going to liberate you, or it may liberate you financially by giving you more money if you win at it, liberate you from being poor, I guess. But I'm very skeptical of the idea that, you know, trading markets is going to create a revolution and fundamentally alter society. With the GameStop thing, when that was, you know, going up and catching a lot of attention, people were saying that about that this is a revolution. We're going to destroy Wall Street. We're going to do this and we're going to do that. And you're just trading a market. You know, you're not, yeah, you put a hedge fund out of business, whatever, that happens all the time. You know, hedge funds go out of business, new ones come in business. So, you know, I don't even, you know, even if the Federal Reserve ceased to function, and we have seen actually at least twice that I could think of off the top of my head where there was a central bank in the United States that ceased operating due to there was one when the founders were there and Andrew Jackson shut one down. But this, you know, we don't even know. We forget about these events. So I'm trying to say that I don't think it would be as important as people think, and it's not going to fundamentally alter society. You know, it's not going to destroy corporations or make the economic system go away, or I don't know what people think it will really do. I guess you know, the best, I guess the argument was, I guess if everyone used Bitcoin, then the government won't be able to tax you. But I'd assume they'd still monitor it or do something to spy on you and find out what you're doing.
Yeah, the IRS, they still carry guns and everything.
Yeah, you got to get rid of their guns. That's how you create the type of revolution people want. But how do you do that?
Yeah.
I don't really.
Well, I mean, it is. I mean, is there value in? Is it disruptive to the financial order in any meaningful way? Do you think?
That's what I'm saying. I don't think it really is.
Yeah, it's just trading a market.
Yeah, I just see it as it's a market trading, and you know, I think that's all markets do. They trade, they go up and down, but you know, you can make money in them. You know, but I don't think I don't think it's a political act of revolution. You know, people like to say that and believe they're doing that sort of thing, but I guess I'm cynical and been doing this for so long. You know, I just don't believe that myself.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Hey, y'all, let me tell you about the Libertarian Institute's latest book, What Social Animals Owe to Each Other, by our executive editor, the great Sheldon Richman. For decades, Richman has been explaining libertarianism to the left from the left. He makes a strong case that any honest liberal, progressive, or leftist actually should be libertarians, since in fact it is freedom itself that provides what y'all want. Richman argues the case for liberty and peace, the human spirit and social cooperation, for true liberalism, libertarianism, against the corrupt forces of statism, corporatism, and violence. What Social Animals Owe to Each Other by Sheldon Richman. Now available at libertarianinstitute.org/books. Hey guys, Scott Horton here for Mike Swanson's great book, The War State. It's about the rise of the military-industrial complex and the power elite after World War II, during the administrations of Harry Truman, Dwight Eisenhower, and Jack Kennedy. It's a very enlightening take on this definitive era on America's road to world empire. The War State by Mike Swanson. Find it in the right-hand margin at scotthorton.org. All right, well, listen, I should cut you loose. No, I shouldn't. I should ask you one more thing. So,
Okay.
we talked about the money and the bonds and the interest rates and the housing bubble and all of this, but and honestly, I've been just so focused on writing a history book about the Middle East here for the last year. If you asked me, if you gave me like a pop quiz on, say east of the Mississippi River, who's got the worst lockdowns and who's got the least and that kind of thing, I would fail. I have no idea, really. I mean, I know that Florida and South Dakota are least worst, and it's either Alabama or Mississippi or something. I don't know. But I get the idea that the American economy is just, like the devil picked it up and shook the hell out of it, and just people are just bruised all over. The thing is just, I don't even know what to compare it to. Somebody dropped a couple atom bombs on us or something. But then it's causing giant booms in places like where I live, but that's at the expense of a lot of other people. And in probably the most important ways, right? Like shutting down major manufacturing and things that are going to have long-term consequences for all of us. So I want to know what's your, rose-colored glasses or your nightmare scenario for the decade that we face here. Funny money bubbles and everything else included, Tell me.
Well,
let me say one more thing.
Yeah.
They're freezing cold bums, and they're not bums. They're like, I might have called them bums. There used to be a time they were bums. These are not bums. These are people without houses, and they're everywhere, man. And it's never been like this in Austin, Texas in my life. And I grew up seeing Vietnam veterans on the side of the road my whole life when I was a kid, which is one of the reasons I'm anti-war now. It's like, boy, they don't look like they're all they can be. But anyway, it ain't like this. I mean, there's tents under every bridge. There's people under every bridge living on the side of every highway, which that can't be safe, man. I wonder how many of them are getting hit by cars and stuff. But it's totally bananas. It's totally out of control. So tell me what it all means, what's going to happen.
Well, the moment we've lived in for almost a year now, with all these shutdowns, I did, metaphor I had, there's an old Star Trek episode, I think, A Taste of Armageddon, where they had a computerized two planets where they didn't want to have a real war where they would wipe each other out with real weapons. So they created a computer simulated war. But when it spit out casualty numbers, they had to go and have these people killed, and vaporized in booths. So I thought of this as something like that, where it is the damage in the economy is like a war. As if bombs are being dropped on us by shutting down and wiping out so many businesses, although they weren't real physical bombs. They were government edicts to stop the growth of this virus. And here we are. I don't really know how bad it is from one state to another. The feeling I have just from where I live is that, we have a curfew. I think not at midnight or something, you're not supposed to be driving. You're supposed to wear a mask when you go out in public and all these different things, but they don't really arrest anybody over these things. So it's all kind of, in a certain way, voluntary. What is damaging is the restrictions on restaurants only being allowed to seat 50%, I think it is, what we're at capacity. But all that said, in the summer, as the shutdowns are going on around July, August, I read a study where somebody demonstrated that even if you didn't have these shutdowns, there still would have been a massive drop in demand anyway, just from people being afraid of the virus, to not travel, not drive, not do stuff. So, we still would have be suffering in some sort of recession, even without all the proclamations and laws and edicts and so forth. But, uh, you know, I believe that things will get better in the next couple months. I don't know if the virus is really going to go away completely, but it does appear to be slowing down now quicker than was expected 6 weeks ago. In Virginia, which is where I live, they're expecting a peak at the end of February, and it peaked almost a month ago or over a month ago here and across the country. So that's a optimistic sign. And the reason for that peak, um, I believe, is that more people got the virus than they thought. I read a study this morning that was done over several, I think 4 or 5 thousand people in Virginia. Uh, it was done over the summer or fall, and they're now releasing the information that out of this group of people that got the virus, and we're speaking of thousands, 2/3 of them had absolutely no symptoms. And now we've got about 10% of the population vaccinated. So I think what's happened is a month ago, they were saying 17% of people nationally had the virus at one point. It's probably double that. And then you got 10% or so vaccinated. So we probably got 40% herd immunity. And that's what's helping this fade or peak out quicker than was expected. So I'm hopeful that there'll be a normalcy, by the summer or late spring, even if the virus doesn't really completely go away, and I don't think it will, because it seems to spread so quickly. And I doubt, a lot of people aren't going to want to get this vaccine, but I'm not worried about that because, if it dies out to the way it was last August or July, it won't be that bad. And I think, it'll get to that level and kind of stay there, and we'll just move on of our lives. I think that's where that's heading, and that will help the economy get better. But it's not going to go back, I don't think, immediately to the way it was, but I think things will improve and get better. The bad part is that we've have so much damage done from all this, and that's the debt situation. And there will be lots of jobs that, will take a long time to come back, and the unemployment will take years to get back to the way it was. So much damage is done, and I think that will set up problems with inflation, the U.S. dollar, over this next decade. But I don't think that's necessarily like the end of the world or a collapse. The worst case scenario is what you have seen happen in third world countries, where they go through a debt devaluation, where their currencies fall for really about 2 years, and they have a lot of inflation, and then the situation kind of bottoms out, and you go into a sustainable boom after that. And the country most recently going through this is Turkey. Their currency collapsed about 2 years ago, and it bottomed last fall. So they've kind of come through this cycle. And if you look at what's happened there, the government is still in power. They have the same ruler. There hasn't been a revolution, and the economy is poised to finally start to improve in a sustainable way. So that's to me. But they've had like close to 20% annualized inflation for 2 years. So that's what causes that's the bad part, right? But this is what's happened in Argentina. It's what happened in various countries in Asia, in the 90s. I think this is probably some form of this is what we're headed for. And maybe it's just slowly starting with the dollar going down a little bit, but in no way has the inflation completely, taken off. So that's why I go back to thinking this is going to be like the 1970s, because that's sort of what happened then.
Yeah.
The dollar went down 50%, but it did it over a decade. I think the inflation rate was like 5% a year or so.
Yeah. Man. So I saw a funny tweet. Boy, it's a world of Twitter, and I'm back on it. Um, the funny tweet said that Peloton, which is an exercise bike company with an iPad taped to it, is capitalized at X billion dollars, which is the exact same amount as Ford, which makes sense because Ford has had the #1 best-selling vehicle in America in the F-150 for the last 30 years, whatever it is. Of course, Peloton, the exercise bike with the iPad taped to it, is capitalized to the exact same degree that Ford Motor Company is in the United States of America. And I can hear David Stockman screaming, and I get his emails all the time, and I only kind of read half of them because I'm always so busy, but I just see he's just so upset always that, like, what is a price anyway? That everything is so distorted that price discovery is canceled and everything is just completely a crapshoot, and there is burning hell to pay coming this way. What do you think of that? You read him? You feel the same way?
Yeah. I mean, that's basically what I believe is happening. I'm just saying that in his book, what's it called? The Great Deformation, is that the
Yeah,
title?
yeah.
This big, giant, thick book. I would say that's the best book to read, to understand how we got here. And he traces it to the 1970s.
I got a computer monitor sitting on it over here.
Yeah, it's great.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry, David.
but no, I'm completely in sync with what he's saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that would we talk like this or say these sort of things, it's easy to think this is the end of the world coming, this is Armageddon, or or whatever. But in reality, these things play out in a short amount of time, in a couple years when the worst of it happens, and some people get rich during it. It's not necessarily that everyone is suffering, because you can find ways to benefit when inflation goes up, and perhaps Bitcoin is one of the things that will happen with. I think there'll be people that invest in some ways in real estate and do it, and I believe I'm doing it through investing in gold. But it's just but doing nothing is not what you want to do.
Right. So yeah, there was this thing, and I'm really, as an economist, I'm a great anti-war guy. I don't know, but I read about the crack up boom, where the day that comes when everyone realizes, oh no, today's the day, and our money is being completely devalued, and then the question is who's the last one holding anything of tangible value while everybody's evacuating from the currency as fast as they can, and so then the kind of legend was you have these old farmers with grand pianos and chandeliers and all these things that all these rich people were trading for food because the money became absolutely worthless in this kind of thing. And, I mean, I don't know. It's our national government. They're the most incompetent people in the world. I mean, the 70s were bad, but could it be worse than that? Are they going to completely destroy the dollar somehow where it, and I guess this is what I've heard described too, is that someday in the world, they're going to decide that $100 bills are no longer good as gold, and that the central banks of the different nations of the world will all try to bail out of the dollar at the same time too. And at that point, the middle part of North America sinks into the ocean or something. I don't know.
Well, I'll leave you, I guess, with this. No one could really predict it. Okay, and the bad thing about that is, okay, I don't really expect myself to predict it. But what about the people that are supposedly running these things? The people at the Federal Reserve, the Treasury Department, the what about them? Well, I get the journal Foreign Affairs in the mail, and it's written for these elites. It reflects elite opinion back at them, I believe. Uh, and it had an article last year saying that all these policies of quantitative easing, printing money, is the right thing to do. That we need to do all this stimulus. In fact, one would argue this is what the Biden administration is embracing. And it argued that, yeah, we'll probably have a little bit of inflation. And Jerome Powell and other people who've spoken for the Federal Reserve, he's the chairman, have said in the past year that we actually want higher inflation. We would like to see inflation get up to 3% a year, and we'd be okay with that. The thing is, this article that I read advocating for all this was saying that they can control it, that they can make inflation just get up a little bit and not go up more, and simply control the situation. And if it started to get out of control, they would then be able to raise rates and early enough to prevent that. And I think you and I would agree that in our lifetime, I've seen no evidence that these guys are able to really control interest rates in an optimal way to prevent bubbles and stop things from busting and all this, and stop volatility in the markets. The opposite is what we've actually seen. So what I'm trying to say is these people apparently think they can control it, manage it, make it so there isn't the type of inflation I'm even suggesting, and they think they can predict and control the future. And I think it's an incredible illusion. So I'm saying I can't predict it, and they can't predict it. So I'm thinking it won't be as bad, as the worst case scenarios could be. And I'm looking at what's happened in other countries, but I have no way to know for sure. But I certainly don't think the people running things are going to control the stuff the way they say they can.
Yeah. Now, is this modern monetary theory and all this? I mean, I see so much of talk about this in not just like leftists, but Democrats and liberals and progressives and whatever. That look how much money they've created so far, and it's fine. And the answer is that really we could afford to give everybody a guaranteed minimum income. I don't know. Why not $500,000 a year? The sky's the limit, man. We'll make everybody rich by giving them all this money, and it'll be great. And you're some kind of barbarian if you think that it shouldn't be like that because you're wedded to some old Austrian.
Well, I from my understanding, they're even worse. Whereas this article in the Foreign Affairs, it's saying that this can become a problem. We'll just stop it before it does. My understanding of the modern monetary people is they say this will never be a problem. We can just print and do all this because it hasn't been a problem yet, so it'll never be a problem. That seems to be, from what I understand, they're assuming, which is completely crazy, but, whatever.
If that's true, I don't know. And they're just counterfeiting money all day, and they're just paying Northrop with it. Maybe they should give us all a guaranteed basic minimum income of $500,000 a year, and then we can all just go skateboarding all day until we're too old to.
Well,
does that not make economic sense?
It doesn't make sense to me, but maybe.
I just want to skate, Mike. That's all. I just want to go ride with the boys instead of doing all these chores. Anyway.
But that's the problem when you have the government spending so much money. Because what about the argument? Well, they're blowing money on taking nuclear missiles out of the ground and putting them back in. Why do that when you could just give me $5,000 a year or something?
Right. Yeah, exactly. At the very least, buy skateboards for all the poor kids, There are kids who cannot afford a skateboard. A new skateboard, just the board with grip tape is $55.
Yeah.
At least $60. But trucks, wheels, bearings, and hardware and everything, there's a lot of kids that can't afford a board like that. So, I don't know. It's funny. I had this argument with a leftist back 1999 ways, where I'm like, look, I'm just anti-government. I hate these guys. I think the whole welfare state is just a trick, really, so that we don't overthrow them for all the horrible other things they do with the wars and the police state and all this other stuff. But, one of my leftist friends said, and he had some study, I don't know how accurate it was, but it was, in the scheme of things, when you look at Bill Clinton's budgets, at the end of the 20th century there, that actually just buying a house for every homeless person in America, like a really cheap house kind of on the outside of town where land is cheap and whatever, you could pay it with it'd be in the tens of billions of dollars. Tens of billions. So you don't have to be a communist to say, what, that is chump change compared to what the U.S. government spends on every other horrible thing in the world. They're got people sleeping outside. And I understand that incentivizes more, sloth or whatever. But at the same time, I don't know how many Texans froze because they're living outside in the last couple of days here. So not to argue for that, but just to show in the scheme of things how twisted everything is. And you could see why the people on the modern monetary theory side, and I hear this all the time from leftists and liberals, that look how much money they have for war. You telling me they can't afford this? And you got that right. Spend $1 trillion a year on the war. So even if, if the words communism and fascism never existed and it was just the government having a big welfare state and investing in infrastructure in the country or whatever, the country would be a hell of a lot better off than it is with them spending $1 trillion a year, as you said, taking nuclear missiles out of the silos and putting them back in again, and the rest of this madness, I like that one. That's a good alternative for digging ditches and filling them back up, pulling nuclear missiles out of their silos and putting them back in. I really like that. I'm going to quote you on that later, I hope. All right. Well, anyway, I should probably stop yammering at you, and the audience is probably sick of me by now anyway, and anxious for the next one.
Well,
so
it's
thanks,
good talking
Mike.
with you as always, Scott.
Absolutely. And listen, everybody, run out. It's on all of your favorite book websites right now, probably. Why the Vietnam War? Nuclear bombs and nation building in Southeast Asia, 1945 through 61. So this is before the worst of it even began here, in all the decision making from the men in D.C. and across the Potomac there at the Pentagon. I can't wait to read this thing. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good talking with you.
Yep. Oh, yeah, and wallstreetwindow.com, of course, for all Mike's financial coverage and advice. The Scott Horton Show, Anti-War Radio, can be heard on KPFK 90.7 FM in L.A., APSradio.com, antiwar.com, scotthorton.org, and libertarianinstitute.org.